Aloha and welcome to Island Connections. I'm Ibrahim Aoude, State of the Unions. This topic we shall discuss with Eric Gill. He's the Secretary Treasurer of Unite Here Local 5 in Hawaii. And welcome, Eric. First, in your busy schedule, you made time to come over. And what we would do, I thought, and you can change things around, talk about the global picture in terms of neoliberalism, because the State of the Unions actually is all over the place. Actually, we're talking about the state of labor worldwide. So within that context, the domestic scene, meaning the national scene, and then what the unions are doing to counter those kinds of attacks on labor and protecting not only union members, but the communities and so forth. And I know that Local 5 here has been active in terms of communities issues as well, because labor is part of the community. So that, and then we can talk more about Local 5, specifically in terms of strikes and picketing and the rest of it. So how would you want to start in terms of talking about the neoliberal era, shall we say?
Well, if you're talking about people in academia make up nice words for things. But neoliberalism, in my view, is the abandonment of the working class interest by politicians who then create new things to pretend to be progressive while they've abandoned the interests of working people. Mm-hmm. And that's what's happened to the Democrats. Mm-hmm. And that's the Democratic, you can see it playing out in the Democratic presidential primary as the progressive wing, and they're basically saying, look, we have to appeal to working people now. We have to be relevant. And sort of coming up with stuff like the Green New Deal, and they're coming up with these omnibus social contracts, which would, in essence, start to address the imbalance of power between working people and a very small group of parasitic
Wall Street guys.
I won't even call them capitalists, mm-hmm. because a capitalist is somebody who invests to make a profit and risks their own money, puts their own money at risk. Mm-hmm. These people aren't playing with their own money, they're gambling with our money. Mm-hmm. And so what we have is a situation where finance capital has, kind of come all the way to full parasitism, where really, you look at all the stuff that they're doing with, derivatives and, derivatives built on derivatives. You could see it play out in the financial crash 10 years ago, mm-hmm. where, you take one mortgage and you package it into this package and you sell it to another and they package it to another package. And by the time, and you got all these people who are all depending on some poor guy to keep paying his mortgage. Mm-hmm. And you have this whole stack of cards built on mm-hmm. that mortgage, mm-hmm. In the mass, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're just they're just gambling with that. Mm-hmm. They're speculating on the differential rates and all this stuff, and it's all gambling that's being done at the highest levels of finance capital at this point. Another thing that's happening, and this has happened in my lifetime, where it used to be that private individuals, private corporations, were the core of the investment capital. It was capitalists who invested their capital, and it's not so anymore. The world has changed. The biggest pools of investment capital now are not private at all. Mm-hmm. These corporations act like they're private corporations, but they're using public money. Mm-hmm. For example, when we've had many different brushes with private equity, and mm-hmm. private equity is, it's a term that conceals the real nature of it, because it's not private equity. These companies go around to big public pension funds like ours. Mm-hmm. The ERS is a relatively small one, but CalPERS and CalSTRS and the New York and Pennsylvania public pension funds have hundreds of millions, billions of dollars to invest. And so they go around and they get investments from public pension funds and then turn around and act like it's a private investment. And they go, in the case of Hilton, for example, You know, Hilton was bought by Blackstone with $26 billion, and you know, $1 billion comes out of CalSTRS and another $1 billion out of CalPERS. And what do they do with this pension fund money from working people? They go buy a company and try to take away the pension from working people to rehab the company, you know, to get the company's profits up so they can sell it. So we have a problem where, you know, the assets of the working people, you know, which are the tax money is working people's taxes. Rich people don't pay taxes. Just wait till we see Donald Trump's tax return, and we'll find out how little taxes working people pay. I mean, rich people pay compared to working people. So, you know, it's our public monies that is being used to buy and sell corporations, and yet we as a society have let Wall Street gamblers hijack our public monies and turn it to parasitic purposes.
Yeah.
You know?
So like you are saying that this is legalized theft, you know, I mean, sanctioned by law, in fact, and all those kinds of policies regarding financing and all of that.
Yeah, neoliberalism did that. I mean, it was under Clinton that they repealed the Glass-Steagall restrictions on investments and allowed banks and finance companies just to do what they want to do. And if you let capitalists do what they want to do, that's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
They're going to do the thing that makes the most money. They'll gamble and take this mortgage and what would be a nice safe investment. Okay, I'm going to pay a mortgage with, you know, X%, you know, it's every year, and they create these derivatives out of it and gamble with it.
Yeah, they design laws to suit their purposes, and this is why the relationship between the politicians and the corporations. In fact, some people are saying now that, in fact, in terms of the scientific definition of fascism, we live in a fascist state, meaning the merger of the state with the corporations. So what do you think of that? Because this has a lot of impact on labor and working people.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And you could see that, and you can see it playing out. And look, there's always a balance of power between the wealthy and the rest of us. The problem is that balance is way out of whack. And it's way out of whack primarily because working people's organizations have been undermined and destroyed over the years. You know, when this country was, and I'm speaking of United States here, because Hawaii, we have our own nation here. But when the United States you know, won World War II, all of a sudden they're able to, you know, make profits off all these countries. You know, it became a real empire. You know, and so, you know, working people, they threw us like washing machines. In the 30s, working people didn't have washing machines. You know,
so it's good to have a washing machine.
Yeah, I mean, the point is that, you know, they created a worldwide empire and started gathering all this money by exploiting people in other countries, and they threw a few pennies on it, so, you know, so that working people could, you know, send their kids to college. You know, we created a middle class. Well, the middle class is being sucked back. It was always just working class people that had a union and got decent jobs.
And only 35% of labor, entire labor in the United States was organized at its highest.
Yeah, it was up. Well, it was up to in the 40% when I was born, but it's been going downhill ever since. You know, we're down to like 6% in unions now, and that means that working people have no organized ability to consolidate their resources to be able to play politics. You know, ordinary working people don't have the money to go, and they don't have the time, and especially now we're working 3 jobs. People don't have the time to go to hearings or go and talk to politicians or go to PTA meetings or do any of the things that organize that working people can do if they're organized. So, you know, unions and the decline of unions has opened the door for this neoliberalism, which was basically when, you know, the Democrats under the Clintons just threw working people under the bus. And you know, NAFTA was a good example. You know, millions of working class people in the industrial heartland were just lost their jobs, and not just their jobs. Those factories moved, to other countries.
Yeah, NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, just to
Right.
between Mexico, Canada, and the U.S.
Right. So the jobs move away. So here's working people after centuries of trying to get a decent life, finally getting into the middle class, finally can have a car, finally can send their kid to college, and those factories go away. Shoo! And next thing you know, the jobs go away. The jobs go away. Then the kids go away. The kids go away. There's no schools. The communities are destroyed. So working people are pissed. White working people are pissed. And that's why they've been abandoned by the neoliberals. There's been nothing done for the white working class since the Great Society.
So how would they divide the class?
Well, that's what they do. They play racism, right? And, the racism has always been, the origin of racism has always been to split white and black working people in this country. And from the start, both were slaves. White people were brought as indentured servants, bought and sold. Those contracts, bought and sold, just like slaves, treated like slaves. The elite of our country is terrified of white workers and black workers getting together. And you can see when that happens, the power of it. So they play the racism, and the neoliberals play right into it. They abandon working class people, which means abandoning the majority of workers who are white, and then they start, we're going to be progressive, so we're going to fight for every minority. So they pretend to be progressive while they're playing identity politics, which basically makes everybody think about themselves as different from others, right?
Chicanos.
We're all split up if we're worried about our identity. Our identity is workers. We're all workers. That's what brings us together. And when working people get that, it's powerful. That was the best thing that happened on our strike last year. There was no racism, no sexism, nothing on that line. Working people were united because we're fighting together. The divisions between people melted away.
We'll show some pictures on TV from Local 5 Unite here, just to show that your local has been extremely active, in defense of, hotel, restaurant workers, plus relations with the community. But to continue with what we have been talking about is the question of, now automation coming up again in a big way. One would think automation is only part of, for instance, like a steel factory that had like 14,000 workers before and now has, let's say, 1,000 workers dealing with it because of automation. But of course, we know with the computer chip and the laptop and the desktop, etc., and a lot of stuff happened in the unions, in the hotels, for instance, or restaurants. So if you would want to talk about this kind of thing, its impacts, automation, high technology impacts on labor, in the entire U.S., including Hawaii, let's say.
The first thing, to understand is that automation is nothing new. Technological change has gone on for centuries, and it has always affected people's work, and that was a big factor in American history and British history as, textile mills came up and, many craft people were displaced, so those people who were craftspeople before became, forced into the working class and become itinerant workers, moving around looking for work. So a lot of our history has been built on this. But automation is really it's using tools to be more productive in an economic terms. And the truth of the matter is that the working class and people's work has doubled, tripled in productivity in my lifetime. And based largely with, especially with computers coming in, it creates a lot of efficiencies, which means that the same amount of work can produce a lot more value. And yet all of that value has been captured by the finance people. Working people's wages haven't gone up in my lifetime.
Actually, it went down, probably.
Yeah, it's been basically static. You know,
in real dollars.
yeah. When we get raises, the cost of the living comes up. The real wages for workers have been flat, and yet productivity has doubled and tripled, which means that all of the benefit of technology has been seized and appropriated by the wealthy corporations, and working people have seen none of the benefit of their own productivity increase. So this is a basic problem for working people, you know, because without strong unions able to secure, you know, some portion of those profits, working people have just kind of slip back, you know. And in our industry, we're seeing a lot of new technological change. In fact, it's the
like nationally, yeah. No.
Yeah, nationally, yes. They roll it out in one place, you know, and then, you know, so, for example, in China, you know, you can check in by looking into a people, you know, it takes a picture of your eye. You know, they test these things out. They got a hotel in Japan that, you know, has robots on the front desk, you know, and they interact with you in this artificial intelligence. You know, they're doing it on the call centers. You know, we're seeing a lot more kind of mundane stuff, you know, just like yesterday I went through the airport and there is the Burger King. And there's 4 panels, and you don't need to go to the counter. You can punch in your order, swipe your card, go pick up your hamburger, and go. And so what that does, of course, is, you know, food and beverage cashiers, that job is going away. You know, I mean, there's a lot of server banking now, and if you go to the restaurant, you know, in Canada, it's the law. They have to bring that little thing and let you swipe it yourself. They're not able to take your card out of your hand. So what that means is there's no cashier anymore. The wait help is doing that work. So now wait help is doing cashier work. Well, cashier work on the wage line is double, triple what the wait help is because of the tipping in our industry. So in essence, they're getting a freebie. You know, they're making the wait help do the cashier job too, and they don't want to give a raise for that. That's how they capture the productivity increases. And so it's happening more and more. Food and beverage, you know, if you go to any airport now, you see all these pads on the table. You know, people don't come around and take your order. You punch in your thing, and one food runner will come out and deliver the food. So there goes, you know, 10 wait help jobs. 10 wait help jobs, right? And, you know, they're all going on these efficiencies, and you know, to a certain extent, once the first one does it, they all have to kind of chime in and follow. So we're going to see more robots and stuff, but it's really more algorithms and stuff that are going to be affecting us. You know, it's going to affect management as well. When you look at what they're trying to do in terms of integrating services with all these, you know, computer programs, what it does is it cuts out a lot of the department. You don't need department supervisors if, you know, if the computer's talking straight to the other computer in the other department. You know, so it's going to affect management jobs as well. So, you know, so here we have an industry that's going to be more and more profitable, making capturing all these technological profits with fewer and fewer jobs. And so you get a basic question then, who's going to buy the soap? If working people have no work, they have no buying power, who's going to buy the products that are made with all this technology?
On this, if I may, you know, you talked about like technological change has been throughout human history, which is true. And, you know, the genie and all of that kind of stuff, you know, really improved productivity, etc., the cotton genie. And then electromechanical devices like, you know, machine, plus electricity, you have to put, you know, electricity on to make the mechanical thing work. These were labor-saving devices, you know, like, and they help the laborer be more productive, etc., etc. In terms of the computer chip, it can be also labor-saving, assuming that you, as you mentioned, that they don't do, the corporations, they don't share the wealth, you know. They, you know, pick it all up. So actually it becomes, as you mentioned, labor replacing, you know, as opposed to what happened in electromechanical thing, right?
So how do you deal with it, right? So, you know, our strike last year, we we had to take on Marriott, the biggest, wealthiest, most powerful hotel corporation in the history of the world. We took them on, and we didn't take them lightly. We gathered 8 cities. We did not take these people lightly. And one of the things we were fighting for was to get ahead of these technological changes. And so, we recognize, however, that there's really you can't just blow a whistle and stop it.
Yeah.
So the question is, what can you do?
Exactly.
And so what we were able to do was basically get them, our strike kind of forced them to make an agreement with us that before they would institute a technological change, there would be a period of evaluation and bargaining, and we created impacts, so we want to capture the work. If there's a new robot vacuum cleaner that's going to do the housekeeper's work, then who's taking care of that vacuum cleaner? Who's changing out the brushes? Who's cleaning it? Is it going to be somebody else, or is it going to be the housekeeper? And from our point of view, we want to retain the work we have. So if there's new tools, we want to get that. So we have a provision in our contract that says, okay, if you're going to be displaced, they have to offer training. We have a training trust, and we will train people to do these new jobs that are created. So and some of this is already played out. If you look at what happened on the docks when I was young, it all went to containers. So you used to have thousands of guys, humping stuff on and off the ships, and now you got one guy with a crane, lifting containers off. So one guy's doing the work of hundreds of people now.
Exactly.
But in that case, the longshoremen at least were able to capture that new work. So they got the crane operator job, and the guy's getting 150 grand a year. So they were able to actually, capture some of that productivity increase for the workers.
That's true.
And so, so we're looking at that, and we have to try to do the same thing on a different scale and a different, in more retail, I guess, in the hotel industry. But if right now they're running programs that do what our housekeeping clerks do. Here's all the rooms that need to be cleaned. Here's all the housekeepers, assigning the rooms out to the housekeepers. All that stuff is increasingly being done now by these.
How many rooms each housekeeper does? 17, 18?
Well, no, we created a new standard in our strike last year of 14. So
14,
we were able to. We were the one local able to achieve a room drop and get some relief for our housekeepers. But in reality, what we didn't get any panacea to stop automation. What we did succeed in doing so far is getting them to slow down, force them through a process with us, address the impact on workers, identify the new jobs created, and create a training component for that, so that we can capture for our members whatever work is there. And so this is something new. When we started bargaining this last year, there was really no model. In other words, there was no contract we could look at as a model. So we created a new model. And it's playing out. In Las Vegas, for example, they have a similar provision in their contract, and Caesars Entertainment, in its corporate wisdom, decided to cut 2,000 bartender jobs and replace bartenders with machines, basically. So they're going through the process now in Vegas on this. They're trying to take all the jobs from the service bars, not the public one where you can sit there, but the one the wait help come in. And so so they're fighting that because it raises all these questions. You got a bartender here, you got a machine now. The machine needs somebody to stack the bottles in it and hook it up right, and maintain it and clean it. Who's going to do that? The wait help now don't have the same time they had on the floor, because now they got to punch in, and it's making one drink at a time, and they got to wait for it instead of ordering, go serve a table, come back. So ultimately, some of this stuff is not going to make that much money for the company. If they're making the wait help do the bartender work, who's out there pumping the drinks? So it is what it is. But these guys all go into it because they're afraid somebody else will get a competitive advantage. And a lot of this robot stuff, by the way, is being driven by defense. That's what's driving it. They're all trying to get that Terminator robot that get it before the next country gets it and stuff. So they're driving this stuff regardless of the social impact.
Robot warriors also and all of that.
But in a larger question, you know, without sharing that productivity increase, ultimately our Wall Street, I won't even call them capitalists because they're not using their own money. But they're driving us into this dead end because ultimately you can create more profits for corporations. But if workers don't have any money, nobody can buy those products. And so the society gets poorer, even though it's creating all this new wealth.
So what would the solution be?
Well,
I mean, you know, I'm saying,
the wrong people are in charge.
To have a vision, you know,
the wrong people are in charge.
A solution.
Yeah, I mean, the wrong people are in charge in our society. Because, you know, if it was your family, you know, would you pick your uncle who's a con man and a crook and a liar and a cheat and selfish and doesn't care about anybody? Would you put that person in charge of your family?
Trustee.
I mean, but that's what we've done.
Right.
We've as a society, we've selected out the most greediest, short-sighted gambler people that really don't care about anybody. And they're the ones buying the politicians and making the policies. So the question always becomes, and it's not just our society, it's been a question for societies ever since classes formed and people started to exploit each other. But how do you control the antisocial actions of the most selfish people among us who are running things? And that comes down to a question of social power. And there is really only one source of power that could counteract this, which is working people, if they're organized, if they can act in concert on their common interests. And that's why we need unions, but we need more than unions. We need working people's organizations of all sorts. You know, I mean, look at all, you know, Chicago teachers are on strike, you know, Oakland teachers are on strike, you know, teachers have been on strike this past year all over the country, even teachers that don't even have a union. And you know, so here's a new wave of strike energy in our basic education, which is preparing working people to work, right? You know, and you know, so public education is for working people. You know, the rich people don't need public education. They send their kids to Puno, right?
Don't go Puno, go Roosevelt. You went to Roosevelt.
I went to
right?
Roosevelt. But my point is that, you know, that the only effective counterbalance to the wealthy is workers together. I mean, you know, we have farmers. There are fewer and fewer of them as the corporates eat them up and turn them into agricultural workers. You know, we have small businesses, more and more. They're getting crunched together, eaten up, but they won't have the power to resist these guys. You know, working people together can compel social change, which is why they're so anti-union, which is why they make all the laws make it hard for workers to join unions. This country is the worst in the world for labor laws and rights of workers to join unions. And, you know, and you can see that when working people were organized much more strongly, as you pointed out, you know, when I was very young, we were maybe 40%, somewhere in there, of workers in unions. And now we're down to 6%. And before, you know, we created Social Security, we created Medicare, we created all these programs, you know, all the so-called programs that benefit working people were created when working people were organized and strong. And in my lifetime, that organization has dwindled. And as it's dwindled, you can see all the bad legislation coming in, all the take-backs, you know, letting the financial guys just go do what they're going to do and crash the economy for all of us while they're, and then we paid our debt for them and let them do it again. You know, and it was the Democrats that did that. Clinton did that. Obama did that. You know, when Obama took office, before he took office, he put Bernanke and Summers and all these people in. The people that crashed the economy, he put them in charge again. So the Democrats have abandoned the interests of workers. And that's the problem going on in the party now, because, you know they can't beat Trump without working people's votes. but the corporate masters of the Democrats, most of them, aren't going to just give control of the party back to working people.
No way.
And so working people basically have no political party representing our interests. And what we are is watching two different factions of the wealthy arguing about the best way to exploit us.
Yeah. I want to go back later on to the question of automation, robotics, and all of that, because it's important. When I said, like, what's the solution, one has to have a vision to have, like, a solution, like, not, oh, here it is a, blueprint for a solution, but not to have a vision, so to work for a solution. But we'll get back to that later on, because I think it's critical. But the question of, for instance, the global financial crisis is 2008. This is the one you were talking about, like, the bubble burst because in the housing, sector, because of all those kinds of, what would you call them, packaged deals that, I make a package deal, I sell it to you, you sell it to him, etc. One bank to the other, financial institution to the other, and then it bursts, and everybody is stuck. The banks lose money. If your house is valued at like 500,000, now it's like maybe 300,000, but you're still paying the banks, for it. You see what I'm saying? But then, how do you solve the question? Well, the way that Bush W first and then Obama continued with, you give money to the banks because they are too big to fail, rather than the people are too small to each of them fail, which would be a huge catastrophe. And that's what exactly
well, but
they did.
If working people's interest was being represented in government at the time, okay, if we're gonna put $500 million to bail out the bank, let's buy the bank and fire those guys that crashed the bank.
Exactly.
Instead, we paid their debts and left them in charge.
Yeah.
And that's the fundamental problem, is that the government is not, it's not representing the interests of workers, it's representing the interests of those predators that exploit workers.
They take care of the class that they belong to.
Exactly. And so, the only counterbalance is to organize our class, because potentially we're, especially in a democracy, working people are the vast majority. And in my lifetime, that has really, those two things have changed, the means of production, the basic infrastructure of our society is now primarily already owned by us. When private equity puts together these billions of dollars of deals, they're buying water companies.
Who
and power
creates the
companies.
value, in terms of anything, like even in services, there's some value.
Who
creates the value? I mean, how do you get, as a corporate business person, how does your corporation make money, for instance? Because I, the worker, create that value, right?
Yeah.
So what happens when there's like some kind of distortion of that? That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is that the problem has always been, if you go back to Marx or something, the primitive accumulation of capital. But capital has been accumulated now.
Yeah.
So our society doesn't, we have big lumps of investment capital now.
Right.
That are already being invested by Wall Street for their benefit. But it's our money. The money that the state holds for the retirees of the government, our workers, people that work for us as a community, we owe them a retirement. That is in a big pension fund. The pension fund invests. Those lumps of capital are not private capital.
Exactly.
They're public capital. And they already own big corporations. We already own the infrastructure. The Blackstones and Oak Trees and Cerberuses of the world put together these big things, and they buy stuff like water companies. They're privatizing our infrastructure.
So we should have a say in who's running it, who should run it.
Yeah, I mean, look, we should have the right people running it who are going to invest it for the benefit of the people whose money it is, which is the taxpayers. And the taxpayers is working people. That's where the taxes come from. And so what we have is a situation where the economy is already socialized. in that the private sector owns a increasingly smaller slice, owns. But because they control the money, they take all the profit and the margin, and they create wealth for themselves. So here we have a situation where we don't have to do this. The government could, if working people had control over the government could say, here's our lump of billions of dollars. We're going to invest it for this, this, and this. We're going to invest it where it creates jobs and not invest it where it destroys jobs. We're going to create, infrastructure that replaces our aging infrastructure instead of just, parasitizing it.
Yeah.
And, this is not something unique. But it's a new opportunity that the new generation of workers have. If we can control our government entities and control the investment policy, we can control the bad actions of the corporations, because they got to come get the money from us. And so, some years ago, I was watching Elliot Spitzer on Stephen Colbert's show, right?
Yeah.
And Spitzer, he got in trouble. They went after him. He were hanging around with prostitutes and stuff, and they all do it. But because he was wrecking the boat, they went after him, right? Okay, so he was now, this was several years ago, running for controller of New York City. And so Colbert, after he got done with the prostitute jokes and stuff, then he asked him, so Elliot, what is this? You were governor of New York, you were attorney general of New York State. Now you're running for controller of New York City. Isn't that a step down? And what is a controller anyway? That was how he asked the question. And Spitzer's answer was really, I thought, very illuminating. He said, look, as a governor, I passed laws to control the bad actions of the financial sector. As Attorney General, I enforced those laws to control the bad actions of the financial sector. As controller of New York City, I got $300 billion to invest. I'm just not going to give money to the bad actors. Now, he didn't win. He didn't win.
No.
But that's the point. In other words, the capitalists are working for us now. We should fire them.
But you cannot.
Well, they control the government, and the government is the one that hired them.
Exactly.
But the government is supposed to be of the people, by the people, for the people. But democracy doesn't work unless working people are organized and able to speak with a single voice on our common class interests. We all have an interest as working people, right? We want good schools for our kids. That's why we work, right? We want health care. We want a decent retirement. Working people are united on these things. We all need them. And that's our interest as workers. And we need a government that will reflect our interests, which means we have to develop the political power to displace those, the finance people that they buy, and put political reps in. And, this is the real world here. They'll buy the new ones too. So you have to have working people organized, or democracy doesn't work. It doesn't work for working people, which is the people, and therefore it doesn't work. If democracy only works for the rich, it doesn't work.
So you're not talking about only organizing unions, but beyond that, because your community and unions have to do that. So that's the state of the unions now, so to speak, is like not that good, but they're fighting to try and do something to try change things. But you are talking about like organization, a political organization. Of workers that would include unions and the rest. That's why. Could you elaborate
that's what we're
on
doing,
that?
right? Because we recognize. Look at it this way. We had a big fight over vacation rentals because it's not just taking our jobs. It's pricing us out of our own neighborhoods.
Rentals.
And if people don't have a place to live, then that's not a success. And it's all being driven here by speculation, and everything being built is for rich people from other places. All those big condos down there are empty because they're all absentee owners. Meanwhile, we got more and more people living on the streets. So we have an imbalance already, and it's an imbalance created when working people's organization shrinks and influence is reduced. Now, at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is a revolution. And I'm saying revolution with a small r, because I'm setting aside the notion of violence and stuff like that. A revolution means a change, a
Change,
flip
yeah.
over,
Yeah,
a
right.
change over.
Yeah.
We need a change over in power, and we need to take it away from the gamblers who have hijacked our finances and our political system, and we need to substitute working people's
Yeah, that's why you
representatives.
need to organize a political party that
Yeah,
speaks.
and so unions
the
are very
interests of the
important
people,
because unions are like the basic organization of workers,
yeah.
right? And it's the place where we can concentrate resources. So you work for a living, you work for the university, I work for the union, I work for the hotel. We're working people. We have a similar interest. So we need unions that can put together a stable financial base so we can hire staff and train them and help them learn to organize. Without that, I mean, you've been in this town. How many coalitions come and go? How many organizations come and go? And they never get enough funding or enough security to have a long-term plan. Most of the nonprofits are chasing grants all the time, trying to survive. And then you have to deal with all the corporate people that are giving you money and do all that stuff. Unions are the place where working people can concentrate their finances into a significant amount of resources to be able to hire and train a long-term staff that can learn how to organize and build an organization. So unions are important, but not sufficient. Because here we are. All of our members need good schools. That's why they're working so hard. They're working 3 jobs so their kid can go to college. Kid can't go to college if you have a lousy primary school, and so you need good schools. I can't bargain good schools at the bargaining table. So union isn't sufficient. We need to build a political movement and a political organizations, and unions are the core of the concentrated resources. We have to be willing and able to do that, and that's what we're trying to do with our IKEA program and stuff like that. We look at it like this. We have an office. Okay, good. You can meet in our office. We have resources. You need picket signs. Good. We can do that for you. We can make banners for you. We assist other working people's organizations to grow and to function, and can build off the resources that we've collected. So right now we're asking our members to, basically cough up more dues. We had a long strike last year. It was 51 days. We spent
a lot of money.
We spent a lot of money. People got to live, and we were able to because we had concentrated millions of dollars in our strike fund. Now we spent it. We got to put more in there. That money represents power because the corporations know if we have it or we don't. And they can count just like us. How many weeks can a worker go without a paycheck? And they can calculate that just like us. So if we don't have the money, they don't respect us. So what we have to do is concentrate our resources. At the same time, we have to be able to foster more working people's organizations and create connections between working people's organizations. And I look at it like if you go to any public school and you go to the PTA meeting, it's all working people there, right? The PTAs are working people's organizations. We should be able to have an activist PTAs. We should be able to have an organization that could unite us in our PTAs to push the changes in the public schools that are needed. Public schools have not gotten better in my lifetime. They've gotten a lot worse. And that's because the investment in all that in public schools has dwindled as as a percentage of our investment. Meanwhile, we're giving tax breaks to all these gamblers playing with money and endangering all of us. But it still comes down to the basic thing. If working people don't have money, so even the capitalists are, look at this Andrew Yang guy, running for president, right? Saying give everybody $1,000 a month. And he's saying, if not, there'll be riots as all the truckers are out of jobs, as the trucks are being automated and all that. And I don't think he's wrong about that, But what he's basically saying is that
It's to
he's
make them quiet, keep them quiet. That's why he wants them.
It's
Not
not
because
just keep them quiet, but otherwise they got no money to buy anything.
That's right.
So who's going to be able to sell something? And at the end of the day, this house of cards that they built up, and it's been driven by consumer spending, so they want everybody to max out their credit cards, just keep buying stuff. So we're all buying stuff. You got to buy stuff now. Everybody got to buy stuff all the time. TVs, you don't fix them anymore. You throw them away.
Yeah, throw them away.
And so we've become a very wasteful society, and it's killing the earth.
No. But that is something like if, for instance, more people because of automation are, getting laid off. One. Or if they were working, say, like in a steel factory or wherever, or even a hotel for like, I don't know, $30 an hour, or a steel factory, $50 an hour, then they are laid off. Where would they go? They would go to a place where they would get like $20 an hour, already. I mean, so $20 an hour. What's that gonna do? Okay, and then more automation happens, I'm not against automation, but automation has to work for the people, not against the people. You see what I'm saying? Not for the profits of the corporations, as you mentioned. And so the question of trying to figure out a way, if labor cannot get the profits, let's put it this way, then they cannot buy, as you said, anything. So they need some kind of income, to, go to school, to healthcare, blah, 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 etc. So we're talking about maybe the state has to work in the interest of the workers and nationalize things. When we nationalize things like, public schools are nationalized, healthcare nationalized, and all of these things, that would make a difference because then the state is working in the interest of the workers, which is all of us, except for those guys, rather than the interest of these things. But that, as I understand from you, requires a vision and education of the workers through a political party that unites the workers, the unions with, a rest of other things, PTAs and the rest of it. So could you say something more about your vision for a political party beyond what we mentioned?
Well, look, we need a political party, as I said, that is revolutionary in the sense that its goal should be to actually change the balance of power and to displace the power of the parasites with the power of organized working people. And, that in essence means being able to, in our society, means having the organization sufficient and able to elect and defend the politicians that will do that. And replace them if they get sold out. And so that depends on us being organized. And, so it can go back and forth, right? If you look at, Elizabeth Warren, for example, has started to propose some real changes in the labor code. This country is very anti-union in its legal establishment.
That's right.
The labor board just makes it hard for workers to join the union. It was supposed to help workers organize, and it's now an impediment to that. And so, this country has consciously and maliciously, under the leadership of the wrong people, has taken an anti-organizing stance against working people because, of course, that affects their profit. So we need to be able to have a party that's ours. Now, running a third party and all that is, difficult in America, which you have this winner-take-all system. It's much more easy to develop a party in a, more of a European parliamentary system where, you could have a piece of power even if you don't have the majority, because you make a coalition and, all that stuff like Johnson's trying to do. They all have a hard time doing it, right? But, but basically we need a political organization that can do those things, that can run people for office and win and be able to have highly trained technical people able to take those offices, I mean, if you look at what the Soviets did and what the Chinese did, it's like they didn't trust the people that actually knew how to run money around were the capitalists. They didn't trust them, So they kind of state-owned everything.
Yeah.
Everything became state ownership, every factory. That's not necessary that the state owns everything to displace private ownership. We already own these companies because they came to us, our pension funds, our social money that we've collected, working people have collected through our taxes and built these funds. Those funds now own the means of production already. So we need to change the governance of those, and we can if we can control the lump of money, which means in practice for the employment retirement system here, the governor got to appoint the right people, the public, just in practice to get that
board. So they're going to be working for us rather than for them. That's the idea.
Well, but we also need people to do it. I mean, the truth is, most working people don't know how to invest money and do that kind of stuff. There's technical skills needed.
Education.
We need people to have a different kind of business education because what they train you to do.
New theories of business and new theories of economics and all of that kind of stuff. Not like neoliberal economics, for instance.
Yeah, I mean that's just neoliberalism is. It's a fraud, right? While you turn against working people as a whole, then you pretend you're progressive by espousing various so-called progressive things, which just pisses off the people left out in that situation is who? White workers. That's why they voted for Trump. I mean, white workers in Pennsylvania been waiting 20 years to vote against the Clinton. Because they did the NAFTA thing and they lost their jobs. They lost their houses, they lost their boats, they lost their hopes for the future. And so, white working people are pissed. I don't blame them, they've been abandoned by the Democrats.
But they're blaming the wrong person, what I'm saying? Rather than going after the guy who did it, the corporations, whether it's Trump or whoever. I mean, Trump is just as bad, if not worse, than the Clintons.
Yeah, no, I mean, Trump is a loose cannon, and if the Republicans get their thing together to pull him out, that's scary to me. That means that they're done with the jackass and are going to put in the real Nazi. And
right, exactly.
I'm much more scared of Pence than I am of Trump.
Pence, worse.
But it's a constant struggle, and I don't think there's any guarantee. If we pass this law, even if you have a displacement of the government and a replacement that happened in the Soviet Union or happened in China, for example. China's not socialist anymore.
I know.
But they're not. The capitalists have taken over that party, right? So there's no guarantee. The only real guarantee in the long term is making sure working people are organized.
Exactly.
And have voice through our collective organization that is powerful enough to be heard in this confusing cacophony information dump that we live in. But working people's, let's put it this way, when you get to the core interests, it's really clear. We went on strike, one job should be enough.
But one job should be enough. I like that one.
Well, everybody likes it because what this is our generation's struggle for the 8-hour day. 8-hour day was what people fought for, right? What was the slogan? 8 hours to work, 8 hours for my family, 8 hours to sleep. Family, community. If you have one job, you can go to PTA meetings. If you have one job, you can go to hearings. You can participate. So the fact that we are forced into all this gig economy and stuff, and everybody's got to work 5 jobs, what it means is it robs working people of their ability to participate in social society.
I want to ask now about, you mentioned IKEA as a way of connecting with the community. One way. I mean, you have other things that you do. IKEA, could you say something more about it? Plus, the relationship between the workers, hotel workers unite here, and IKEA. I mean, how do they look at it? Is there education regarding it? This is, I think, important.
Well, IKEA
is a party or whatever.
Yeah, look, IKEA it's kind of a backfilling, if you will, because we don't have a party, but we do have to be relevant in issues that are central to our interests. Education, for example, housing. Those things we can't bargain at the bargaining table.
Yeah.
So we need to be able to create a political organization that can advocate for us on those broader issues that are central to our interests, but are not accessible to collective bargaining at the workplace. So we started IKEA in the hopes that, frankly, that people would grab it and run with it, and we use whatever resources we have. We're a union. We're not like a rich corporation, but we have some resources. We want to be able to help other people to build organization in their own communities and in their own working people's interests. So it's not intended to be, we didn't set it up like board of directors and all that stuff. It's meant to be a movement, to be a connection, a connection between different people's organizations, and that's what we try to do. So, on housing, for example, IKEA is our political movement. Primarily it's Local 5 funded, but we have other people that take it and run. Excited about our high school program because what we're finding is that the new generation coming up, and I think that young girl from Sweden is a good example. I mean, any young person coming up nowadays is better be, if they're not doing that, they're not paying attention.
Yeah, right.
And so I think it's the new generation coming up that will have the historic opportunity to change the world. And they won't be able to if we can't organize enough political power by organizing working people to give them the tools to work with.
What's the origin of the name IKEA?
Well, we debated that, a few years ago. You saw it all over the place. I don't care. And so it was a retrograde movement. It was an expression of frustration of working people not having any chance to be affecting anything. I don't care already. You just do it. The politics. I don't care. So that's a bad thing when working people feel so alienated that they don't care about the things most important to them. Right. So we wanted to turn that around.
So I care.
IKEA. And we wanted to be local in Hawaii. We wanted to be Hawaii. It's a label. It's a useful tool. It's not sufficient. But we're attempting to compensate for the fact that we don't have a party that represents us, and therefore we have to kind of create these cross organizations to unite us.
It's good that to do that. Like I know you come to classes and talk. As a union, you give talks. Some of our students go and work with the Local 5 Unite here and in IKEA and other places. Some of them are organizers, right?
Well, we got one sitting over here.
I mean, and this show, we've done a couple of shows, if not more, with you. And so I'm glad that we're having this one now. And just gonna wrap it up because we're basically out of time.
You don't want to keep talking?
No,
I can go on and on.
No, I know because they're telling me like wrap it up, buddy. So, I'm glad we had this occasion, and we will do more and with other things.
I think one final thing though is a ray of hope. I mean, if you look at what's happening, and these things come in cycles. When I was a young man, the war was driving it. Anti-war. There was a lot of action up here at the university. That's when I first met you, and then we've been through this trough period, the me generation and all that stuff. Kind of narcissism. But the new generation's coming back out. But what you saw in 2018 was the biggest strike wave in 40 years. And if you look at what's going around the country, we just spoke about Chile, right? Chile, there's hundreds of thousands of people, 1 million people on the street. They don't report it. There's 1 million people on the street in all of these different countries.
Out of time, they tell me. But thank you.
But the movement is there. It's up to us to lead it.
Thank you very much for coming. And for our viewers, mahalo nui loa. See you next month, December, and aloha.